case you're a normal functioning member of society and don't spend most of your days worrying about Philadelphia sports teams, here's the lowdown. The Eagles are in a very tricky spot right now. They may have $24 million in cap space ahead of the upcoming season, but by the time the season ends, there'll be $84 million over the cap. With a potential Zach Ertz extension on the horizon and a few important decisions to make, having such a mountain to climb is very problematic. With the pandemic meaning that the cap remains stagnant next year, it's time for Howie Roseman to get to work. But how exactly can the Eagles go from being $84 million over the cap, the worst team in the NFL, to actually being under it and in a position to leverage future deals for players like Zach Ertz? Well, I've crunched the numbers and here is one path the Eagles could absolutely pursue on their road to salary cap redemption. Step 1. Rolling last year's total. Let's start with the easy one here. There's probably a reason that the Eagles didn't pursue players like Everson Griffin or a multitude of other expensive free agents or trade targets such as Jalen Ramsey, Jadeveon Clowney, and the list that seemed to go ever on. Roseman knows that any unused cap space will roll over into next season. This would mean that if the current $24 million value remains untouched, it would bring the 2021 value down to $60 million. So baby steps, alright? We shave $24 million off, there's $60 left to get rid of. The next step would be to work out what to do with ALSHON Jeffrey. In an ideal universe, he plays a fairly big role in the outcome of the 2020 season, redeems his character concerns from years past, and proves himself as a viable trade target for wide receiver needy teams across the league in an offseason where the draft could be a total unknown. Now, Adam Kaplan recently cited that Jeffrey could be ready to go as early as September and would obviously be the team's primary X receiver. Even if that doesn't happen and the Eagles can't get anything back for him in the trade market, cutting him would net them a saving of $7.8 million in cap space, bringing it down to $53 million. So it's unlikely that Jeffrey sticks around, but whether it's cut or traded, who knows? All that matters is that value goes down a further $7.8 million. Second box ticked, we move on to Malik Jackson, who's also in a bit of a tricky scenario. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of this, but the reality of the situation is that he has got a monumental cap hit and is essentially the third defensive tackle on the depth chart. His first year in Philadelphia was ripped away by injury, but a rebound here could do wonders for his trade value. The Eagles could restructure Jackson's contract, but with the depth chart being so strong, it may prove more viable to at least explore the trade market. If they part ways, they'll save a further $12.6 million in cap space, bringing it down to $40.4. This is where things get tricky. The next man on the list is Lane Johnson, and Howie Roseman is going to have to flutter those eyelids and use some of his most wizarding ways in order to get his stars to take some restructures. For the sake of simplicity, we'll leave Roseman's matrix decoding skills to the side and assume that the restructures will be the standard ones that the NFL see. This would reduce the base salary to a veteran's minimum, converting the rest of it to a signing bonus that would be prorated over the remainder of his contract. The new collective bargaining agreement means that that value rises 20%. Now that is important. So for Lane Johnson, his base salary next year is $7.7 million. $6.2 million worth of cap saving will be transferred into bonus, meaning the Eagles can move their value owed down to just $34 million. Next up, Derek Barnett. And for me, this is the easiest decision to make. For many, this will be a tricky one barring a breakout year. The former first round pick to me has been underwhelming outside of a few splash plays and struggles with consistency, but is entering a fully healthy offseason for the first time in his career. Now, if he struggles to stun in year 4, then that $10 million fifth year option becomes a lot harder to handle. Barnett is still incredibly young and an intriguing trade candidate. Parting ways with him and lifting that $10 million weight would bring the cap down to $24 million and give the Eagles some more assets to reinvest through the draft, or more importantly, at the position. Next up, we're parting ways with Marquise Goodwin, who is unfortunately sitting out the season, and very smartly so. He counts for $4.4 million worth of cap space next year, and by that time, I'd like to think that Greg Ward Jr., John Hightower, and Kez Watkins can take a substantial leap in their development and make the veteran almost expendable. As sad as it is that we never got to see him play a snap in Midnight Green, his $4.4 million hit off the books brings the Eagles down to 19.6 million. It was only a matter of time until Howie came knocking at the door of the face of the franchise, who is set to make $15.4 million next year in base salary. Carson Wentz could restructure that to a veteran's minimum that would see that drop down to just 1.7 million, converting a massive 13.7 million into a prorated bonus. If Wentz agrees to this, then the Eagles are only $5.9 million over the cap, and he may well be the key holder here, so they have to get Wentz to agree, but realistically, I think this should be attainable, and it pushes the Eagles within reaching distance. Ultimately, we're going to cut DeSean Jackson, and listen, this one is also a no-brainer, especially with Jalen Reagor already waiting in the wings. Again, barring a breakout, this should be fairly smart here. Jackson's 2019 was a total write-off, and unless something drastically changes, the Eagles could pocket $5.8 million in cap space by letting the veteran go, putting them just $100K over the cap. And finally, a Brandon Brooks restructure, and to put the cherry on the cake, Brooks has his new deal chopped into. His base salary would drop to just $1.1 million, leaving $8.9 to be converted into bonus, pushing the Eagles firmly over the threshold, keeping their heads above water and giving them $8.8 million to play with. Now, in conclusion, this is going to be an absolutely chaotic offseason, and a lot can change depending on how well the Eagles do in 2020. This doesn't take into account pending free agents who could be on the cusp of a breakout year. Someone like Sidney Jones, for instance, who may well be the starting CB2, could be ending up in absolute limbo here. We just don't know how the season's going to go, and depending on how well the Eagles do, a playoff run, dare I say a championship or Super Bowl run, could throw caution to the wind and leave Howie with an absolute train wreck to try and deal with when it comes to the salary cap picture. But I think when diverging through these numbers, when looking at the potential solutions, you kind of end up feeling a little bit reassured. Like, being $84 million into debt is not a situation any team wants to be. But with some smart restructuring, some smart roster management, and cutting ways with veterans that just may not quite fit your vision for the future, I don't think it's that unattainable for the Eagles to come out with their heads above water and in a position to hand someone like Zach Ertz a big, juicy contract. Now, they may well give him a year up front where he makes $3 or $4 million guaranteed. They may well end up parading the rest into a bonus. I don't know. But I do think that this is very, very attainable if Howie Roseman gets on this early, gets on it now, and unlike the tight end situation, jumps the gun, which is something we're characteristically used to seeing him doing. But what do you think, guys? Let me know down in the comment section below. Hopefully, this has helped you gain a little bit more understanding of the team's salary cap picture. And I want to know what moves you would make in order to get the Eagles over the line. Is there a player that you'd cut that I haven't mentioned? Is there someone I should be aware about here? Or maybe something I'd have missed? Let me know in the comments, guys. Thank you for taking time out of your day to watch this content. If you want to follow us on Twitter, it's at Liam Jenkins PSN or at Philadelphia SN. And until next time, guys, check out PhillySportsNetwork.com for your latest dose of Philadelphia sports coverage. We'll see you soon.